Oh, hi. Hi. Hello. Greetings. Very quiet. That'll be good once the show starts, but it's kind of awkward for me right now. I'm Jennifer. I work here. Welcome. How many of you are here for the first time in the green space? Nice. Wow. How'd you hear about it? The email. That person sitting there. Cool. Thank you. Are you all fans of this podcast? Are you regular podcast clubbers? What's your deal? Okay, this podcast. Me too. I'm obsessed with it. It's so cool. Well, thanks for coming out. I hope this won't be the last time you come to the green space because we do a lot of great stuff here. We bring people together to have conversations, play music, make art, and we create audio and video that we beam out into the wider world. So that is why, in addition to courtesy to the people around you, we would love if you would silence all your ringing things right now. You can leave them on if you want to do some subtle tweeting. We encourage such things if that's your bag. And the whole show is being recorded and live streamed, so you can go back and find it on Facebook and share it with friends and foes later if you like. Did you get a cocktail on your way in? Yes. Did anyone try the Bed-Stuy Sangria? It's pretty great, right? So that cocktail is in honor of our newest podcast here at WNYC Studios, which is called Late Night Whenever. I wish I could light up that neon sign in the back for you as I say that. Ricardo, can we get that? No, just kidding. Don't do that. That show tapes every Tuesday night here, and we actually have tickets for tomorrow night's taping, despite the fact that it has amazing, amazing guests. So I think there's like 3 left if this appeals to you. We have Leslie Odom Jr., yeah, Aaron Burr, yo. I don't know if he's going to sing, but he's amazing. And Jason Jones from The Daily Show. So they were late-breaking bookings, so we have a couple tickets left if you want to check it out. That's tomorrow night right here. But every Tuesday we're taping it, and you can subscribe now. Do you know who Michelle Buteau is? She's the host of this show. She is a Two Dope Queens regular. She was on their HBO special. Man, you guys are missing out, although I'm jealous of the fact that you now get to discover Michelle. She's amazing. Check her out with us, hopefully. Subscribe to that podcast. It starts April 3rd. Okay, I'll stop. But anyway, we do a lot of events here. Every Monday night it's podcasts. Every first Friday we have a variety show. Brian Lehrer is live from here every month. We do a lot of classical music as well. So sign up for our newsletter and you'll be the first to know about all of that stuff. So before we start, I do have a couple words of thanks to our members. Are any of you members of WNYC or WQXR? Yay! Are any of you New York Times subscribers? Is there like hefty crossover in that? Cool. Well, thank you all for doing those things. Independent journalism, fact-checking, it's important. Sadly rare. We're also supported by the Jerome L. Green Foundation, so thanks to them. And I want to thank Beth and Carmen and Samantha and everyone on the New York Times team for bringing their podcast club here because it brings lots of amazing people to this stage. So, you ready to get going? All right, let's kick it off. I'm going to turn it over to the Senior Manager for Events Marketing at the New York Times, Beth Weinstein.
Hi, everybody. My name is Beth Weinstein. I develop subscriber events at the New York Times. Our programming strives to give you a window into the newsroom. And we try to bring you the stories behind the stories and bring our coverage to life to help you connect directly with our journalists and with their work. We do this through a variety of ways. We have a monthly engagement here, which is fantastic. We love the green space. We do events like a tour of Citi Field led by Tyler Kepner, baseball reporter, followed by a game, or a performance of Dear Evan Hansen with the Talkback with one of our journalists, David Gellis, or a taping of The Daily Show to highlight our Best of Late Night column, followed by a Talkback with Pat Healy and Trevor Noah. So we do a bunch of different things like the event that we have on Wednesday at the New School to showcase our Overlooked project. We have Sarah Jessica Parker, Justin Vivian Bond, Laurie Anderson, Greta Lee, a bunch of others, all reading from the obituaries that we had just published for women who never received obituaries when they passed. So we hope we're going to follow up with a whole bunch of emails and a whole bunch of details. We would love to keep seeing you. Now I'd like to introduce Samantha Henning, who's our fantastic editorial director of audio. But before that, we're going to listen to a bit about Where Should We Begin with Esther Perel. You'll have listened to episode 7 in advance of this event, but we want to give you a sense of what the rest of the season is like. So we're going to listen to that now, and then Samantha's going to come on. Thanks so much.
It's like you can be right or married. Mm-hmm. With this, you will be right, but you will be alone. And it's never difficult to be right and alone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my thought was not to get divorced and then the next day have her like move into the house.
She said, I don't want him going out the front door and you coming in the back.
5 nights out of the week, she wouldn't sleep in bed with me. The sofa kicked my ass. I couldn't compete with the sofa.
I've learned another person can't completely fill all the needs that you have inside you.
I told her I didn't know it was going to be like this, that once we had a child that I would be like downgraded, because it's now like all about the kids.
This is going to sound cheesy.
That's okay, we like cheese.
But it's, I forget what the movie's called, but the You Make Me Want to Be a Better Man. It's kind of like that, where she brings that out of me.
And when's the last time you told her that?
About 10 seconds ago.
So you're gonna do it again, but this time you can look at her rather than me?
You make me want to be a better man.
Is anything that is for you selfish?
Yes.
So she becomes your sin.
Yes.
Did you know that you were becoming someone's forbidden pleasure?
Yes.
Together we're gonna aim for a different conversation, a different exchange.
How do I do that?
I will try to help you.
This is Where Should We Begin with Esther Perel.
On a little bit because we want this to feel interactive. Have any of you been to one of the Podcast Club events before? Oh, mostly no. Okay. So Podcast Club, just to give you a quick overview, it started about 2 years ago at the New York Times, just as a little internal thing that we did once a week. We would get together and talk about one episode of one show. It was a way of kind of exploring new shows and getting to know the whole podcast ecosystem. And then we expanded into a Facebook group, and now we have started doing events here. But the idea is that it's kind of like a book club, and it's meant to be something where it's a pod club, where we're all in conversation. So please don't wait until the end with questions. We hope that you jump in with questions about this episode that you've hopefully listened to, and also just anything that you want to talk about. It's kind of free reign. Esther will tell you if you're going too far. But so to start, I guess, I'd like to hear a little bit about how you decided to turn this into a podcast, what you do. I actually have a colleague who came to our internal discussion of this show who used to be a research assistant for you, and for one of your books listened to a bunch of cassette tapes of your sessions. So she was kind of the where should we begin listener. But what made you think that this would work well in podcast form?
Can I ask a question first?
Yeah, sure.
How many of you would say that you are in a relationship at this moment? And how many of you would like to be in a relationship? And how many of you would like to be out of the relationship you're in? At least on occasion. Honestly. And how many of you would say that in light of all the major social changes that are happening, that when it comes to relationships in the last few months, you've had conversations like you've never had before? Yeah. Okay. So I'm a relationship therapist. For the last 35 years, I've been working with couples and families and individuals, but I have a predilection for couples. I think that if you look at friendship, it hasn't changed too much in the last 100 years. Sibling relationships haven't changed so much. Parent-child relationships have changed a lot. And there is one unit that has undergone a massive change or makeover, and that's the couple. And yet couples have expectations piled upon them that are of epic proportions, with less resources, less time, and often no vocabulary for the conversations that they need to have. And couples are very isolated these days, and they come to the therapist, and often it's the therapist who's the only person to know anything. When we used to live in the village, everybody knew everything of what happened to the neighbor. You could hear every fight, and you could hear every fuck. I mean, it was just really, it was porous walls. But now your friends can break apart and divorce, and you didn't see it coming. And I just thought, that epidemic of loneliness and isolation for everybody, but certainly for couples, made me want to create something where I thought, this is some of the best theater in town, and nobody knows it. And at first, when Jesse came with the Audible team and June Cohen from TED and Eric Newsroom, the idea was to do something more similar to The Affair, the Showtime series, which I consulted for, and it was a kind of a he said, she said. But I didn't think that that's actually the way couples necessarily go. It's not a he said, she said. It's what he said that made her say the very thing that she never wanted to say, that then made him say the opposite of what he actually means. That then, is that kind of a thing. And so how do you bring that to the public ear so that you can listen to the depth of the stories of others and actually realize that you're standing in front of your own mirror?
And so, Jessie, that was sort of your mission then?
She's the magician.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we could have made that show, that affair show, where you have the one side of the story, the other side, and Esther is the backbone that kind of keeps the story together. But after doing 3 recording sessions in her office and just listening to what actually happens in there, it's like you did not need to fuck with anything because that was so powerful. And Paul and I, the engineer, were like sitting in the next room and we're weeping and we're going back and forth over like whose side we're on at any given moment. And we're like, someone else needs to experience this. It's amazing. And then we went home and had these conversations with our partners like, I'm so sorry that I did this. And at least for 24 hours, you're a nicer, better person after coming out of a listening session at Esther's office.
They've never seen it. That's what is important to know, is that the team itself has only heard and has only worked from listening. They themselves have never seen the sessions either.
Interesting. So how do you cast for it? How do you find these people?
So no one in the series is a patient of Esther.
Nor will be.
Yes. So it's very important. There is a clear distinction. The process of applying to be her patient is very similar. That's one of the things that made it kind of easy to solicit applications for this, is because she has this online process. So that is very much the same. You fill out this application. Olivia, who's a colleague of mine at Audible, and I go through and kind of decide what we think of couples. Then we call them on the phone. And then what you hear at the beginning of most of the episodes is actually the phone screening. So they don't meet Esther until they come into her office for that session, and it's a one-time thing.
And it's a one-time, 1 hour?
One time. When I do extended consultations, they are 2 to 3 hour sessions.
Oh,
and here it's a one-time 3 hour session that is pretty much, it's totally unscripted, and the only editing is time, length. And then the voiceover, my commentary, which is not that different than when I do training tapes. For other therapists, I explain why I'm doing, what I'm thinking, why I went this way, what I was wondering, what I tried. And so I thought I should do the same thing for anybody. It's, it wasn't meant to be didactic, but it could, if you ever want to learn to do this.
And do you find yourself conducting yourself any differently, knowing that it's being recorded and that people will be listening?
So I was trained as a systemic family therapist when at the time most of our work was done behind a one-way mirror. Because there's only 2 things that you're supposed to learn to do without ever seeing it being done, and that's therapy and sex. It's very bad. It's like nobody ever actually sees what you do, and so all you do is tell what you think you've done, which may not at all be the case. So I was videotaped during my entire training. And every time I would watch myself do a session, I would realize all the things that I didn't see when I was in the room. And I'm used to having myself, in a kind of a double position. So I tape many, many sessions with my clients that they take home, because a 3-hour session you'd want to remember. And sometimes it's a blur when you leave, and you want to be able to listen to it again. So the phone is commonly on my table, their phone, my phone, just so we have it. And I just wrote a book, The State of Affairs, and so I was also recording. And then it's all open. I'm recording because I'm going to write, but when I write, it is anonymous. And if I choose you, I will send you everything I write, and you'll tell me if you think I understood something. So I am used to that process. And the only thing here is different is that I have this in front of me, and within literally a minute, I forget that thing is here. Like I now just need to look at it to remember that it's here. And so do they. I don't have a feeling like I'm being watched, which is one of the reasons why I never wanted to do this for TV. I have been offered many times to do this, and I didn't think I could do justice. Like, who am I working for, the audience or the people in the room? When it's in my own office, it follows exactly what I'm doing. I think I'm just doing a session, and so do they.
Wow. And so the fact that it's a 3-hour session, I was assuming it was an hour and that this was largely unedited. But so what generally makes it into the episodes, is that usually something that you build to and that comes at the end? Because they're speaking so openly, or are people coming in prepared to be that open from the beginning?
That's your...
So we don't manipulate too much of, largely big sections come out, or we'll find the ending. Because she does kind of narrative-based therapy, there is a storyline through any session that I've ever sat through that she does. So I won't say the editing is easy, and you definitely have to pick, what story are we telling here, because you could leave the room and there are 3 different ways you could turn this session into something to listen to. But so it's a slow process, and then when we bring it back to her a couple weeks later and we play it back in her office and she listens and we stop down and she says things like, at this point I was thinking X. So all of the director's commentary that you get through this is the second time we go back to her with this. And sometimes she'll say, oh, there's too much of that, or I love it when she's self-critical because she's amazing. And then when she's like, oh shit, I shouldn't have said that, or I should just shut up, it always makes me laugh because I don't think that at all. And so sometimes we'll leave some of that in too, because it's amazing to listen to her even critique her own work. I don't know if I just answered it.
It's very tough to listen to yourself. I mean, it's not like it's so easy. It's like, ooh, I cringe. I hope I shut up. I didn't say anything, and I let this thing move, and I didn't intervene. And you're micro following every move of the choreography. A couple session is a choreography.
Right. So it's like you're still in training, sort of watching yourself and critiquing
all
yourself.
The time. Yes, like any composer, when you listen, it's like, but then I'm relieved when I didn't say anything. Usually it's just when I say nothing. That's what I'm looking for. And I let it go, and I didn't act in a way that my discomfort stopped their process. That's really what this is, right? If intensity occurs in front of you, if people are in a state of rawness, you sometimes want to protect them by stopping it, which is the opposite of what you want to do. You have to trust that the people have their own natural curative elements inside of them. And that's why you want to not talk. So when I don't, I think, yes.
It's a funny thing for, a host to be proud of herself for stepping back and not really being a part of it. So I want to get into this episode, which is season 2, episode 7, what hopefully everybody listened to.
How many of you have not listened to it?
Oh, have not. I'm calling them out.
Okay, just so we know.
Just a couple.
Okay.
Slow to admit it back there.
How many of you didn't finish it?
But so that means how many of you did actually listen to it? I want to see that's great. Okay. So this is, it's available on Audible now. It will be available on Apple Podcasts and other platforms in 4 weeks.
My website.
And on your it's available on your website?
Yeah,
okay, estherperel.com. So this episode, you wanted to do it, Jessie, I think you brought it up and said it was your favorite. Why is that?
Well, favorite is hard.
Yeah.
But I think, and I sat with a couple other producers on the team and we're like, which one should we talk about? Because we all feel differently whether we edited that one or we booked that couple or however. But I think this is one that we could all kind of agree on. Esther spoke at South by Southwest 2 weeks ago, and she also wanted a clip to play. And so we pulled all these clips, and we kept going back to this episode because there was just a wealth of feelings and things from that episode that just sort of makes it the standout. And if you read about it on paper, you're like, I mean, as with most of these couples, if you just dumb it down to 2 sentences, you're like, I don't have these problems. This is not me. And then you listen to it and you totally forget this is not your life. You probably did not cheat on your partner and give her chlamydia. However, this couple is totally relatable regardless of that. So I found myself rooting for both of them in this episode in a way that if in the beginning you think, oh my God, he's a dog. Or at least I did.
Yeah.
But by
I'm
the time
curious, for other people in the room, who did you find yourself rooting for someone? Did that change throughout? Yes. I see a nod, a vigorous nod.
Even at the end?
Time?
By the end?
Do you mind speaking in the...
I think you definitely empathize more with him as it goes on, but definitely in the beginning there's a lot of strong feelings about just that circumstance of dealing with a health scare like that. That's a really serious issue, and the fact that it's a lot to deal with, so I couldn't help but feel a lot of strong feelings there.
But the sexual energy coming off this couple was like palpable.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never, you probably see this a lot. I had never, in the 18 couples we talked to, ever felt it coming out of that room. It was crazy.
Yeah, definitely when they were talking about them getting ready and also the fact of wow, she's still talking, she's still there in the room with him. It kind of also makes you think. And I really I don't know, my favorite parts of every episode too is sometimes when the one partner speaks to Esther directly, and then you go tell this to your partner, and you just hear the total shift of tone of when they talk with each other. Yeah, that is pretty great. Mm-hmm. But yeah, still a lot of strong feelings.
Anyone else? Don't be shy.
It's a safe space.
Yeah, right here in the front.
I agree. I found myself on her side, but then because I've listened to the podcast a lot, I was like, don't choose sides. And I definitely empathized with him as it went on, but every time you cut in or you kind of, I don't want to say put him in his place, but at least with the ego thing and everything like that, I found myself being like, thank you. And so I think by the end of it, I was grateful that I felt like he wasn't in his own world anymore, and he was able to empathize with her more. And it might also be because I'm a woman that I found myself empathizing with her too. But there was one line from that episode that stuck with me, which was you saying, in reconnecting, it's not trust, it's risk or something. And that I replayed it 4 times because that was the one thing where I was like, I've never been in this circumstance, but that line just completely stuck with me. And yeah. So.
Is there a man in the audience who is brave enough
right
to
in
weigh
the back?
in? Yeah, there's someone back there.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, especially your thoughts that you shared at the end of the episode about his entitlement. And I felt like you expressed that feeling very strongly at the end and at some points during the session, but maybe not as strongly during the session as you did at the end. And I guess that definitely resonated with me. He did seem very entitled throughout to being treated a certain way, to her attention throughout. And I guess it concerned me at the end. I don't know that she would necessarily express that to him, that, I can't always give that to you, or you're not entitled to this. So I'm still rooting for her, and I guess I hope that she has that strength.
How many of you, when you listen to this couple, also see the larger social scripts in which this couple lives? Because that part of, for me, entitlement is not a bad word. There's a healthy sense of entitlement too. But what I'm picking up with him is that, he's this classic saga. Forget the fact that he cheated and all of this. It's the classic saga of a man who came out exactly the way society wants masculinity to be performed. He became silent, strong, stoic, autonomous, non-reliant on anybody, and unable to articulate his emotions. The program worked well on him. This is why I'm not angry and judgmental of the man, because I see him as a casualty of a socialization.
But then in the course of this conversation, there's a real moment of vulnerability, which we actually have a clip of.
Yeah.
I had a very hard time shedding that person who's invulnerable, who can take on anything, who can just, grin and bear it.
Did your father hit you?
Yes. Yes, I was
That was
abused.
a pure guess. And is that where you learn to grin and bear and say, I will never show you that you hurt me?
Yes. It drove me. That's what it did.
As in, I'll show you?
I'll show you
I'll show you. I'll show you what?
that no one can hurt me. I'll never show vulnerability again because vulnerable people get stepped on. And I don't want to be a victim anymore.
That's a very bold guess. Do you make a lot of bold guesses like that?
All the time.
Yeah.
Because if it's, I play hot and cold. Remember that game? So I just say hot or cold. And why did I think that? Because the way he presented this grin and bear, I had that sense, and that's when entitlement takes on a whole other meaning for me. I can see the beginnings of this, of the I did everything right, and as you remember, he's what we call men who are often caught in what is called the unholy triangle, an abusive, violent father who often is belittling of the mother, and a helpless boy who wants to protect his helpless mother, and who doesn't want to identify with her because she's weak, and doesn't want to identify with him because he's cruel. That's the unholy triangle. I don't know, something in the way he talked about that grin and bear, I had that sense of that, so many boys that stand in front of their fathers and just kind of stay tough, and you will never get a tear from me.
So do you have a trick for getting these, traditionally masculine, more closed off people to open up and be vulnerable with you?
It's her superpower.
Yeah.
Seriously. Men come up to her. I'm speaking for you. You can actually answer this in session. But it's strange to be in parties or at the airport or on an airplane with her, and people just come up and start saying things that you're like, she doesn't even know what your name is.
Like without even knowing who she is?
Yeah.
Just
No, they know who she is.
Know.
And
okay.
they don't care if she knows who they are, but they need to tell her this thing that's burning inside them. Apropos of like, hello, here's my life story.
Wow.
So I definitely think it's your superpower.
Has that always been your superpower, or was it learned?
No, you don't learn. I mean, I have a deep, what you learn is how to express it. But I have a deep curiosity for people's stories and life experiences, and I also don't think that what you see is what it is. And once I have that, then you can show me a certain facade. I'm going to go look for what's behind it. I love backstage. Even though I'm on stage, it's like, and I'm not afraid to ask. That's the other thing. And no, there's no trick. The trick is to understand this. It's, you see this person or many of the men, and I know that you don't become this way out of nothing. There's a story behind it. There's something that led you there, and that was adaptive at some point. that our defenses one day were adaptive. It's just that now, then, you know, you're in a different situation. Can you change the story? So the hidden story of vulnerability that hides behind anger or toughness is a very common story of men, because many men in many places on the planet are allowed to only express two fears. One of them is anger, but certainly not feelings. I mean, you know. So once you understand that the anger is the permitted emotion, then you go to look for what is the one that they would have expressed if they could do away with this. That's the logic. Doing couples therapy and doing therapy in general, but certainly couples and family therapy, is like playing pool. If you want one ball to kick the hole, you need to know which is the other one you need to kick. It's never linear. You know, what is the one that needs to go so that it will touch this one? And once you have that, you know, that's maybe the trick, but it's that I learned. I learned from my mentor to play pool.
Well, so in this episode, I mean, he's talking about his childhood. She also goes back to her childhood. The show is called Where Should We Begin? Is the answer always childhood?
No, but it's a good place to go. It's not always, and it's not the only place to go, but it is our origin story. And it is the people with whom we learn to love, and with whom we learn to be in relationships, and with whom we learn to trust or not, and with whom we learn to ask or not, and with whom we learn to receive or not. So all the foundational verbs of being in relationships, we do learn in our early lives. So it is a good place to go look for reference.
I'm curious.
Not in a deterministic way. It's not, correlation is not always the same as causation. Things connect. That doesn't mean that one thing caused another. And that doesn't mean that you have to stay stuck in your story either.
Jesse had made the point that, you know, this is a story where you might, and I feel like this is true of a lot of episodes, where you might start off thinking, oh, this scenario doesn't apply to me, and then somewhere along the way you find the moment that feels so relatable. Did anyone else have that experience, maybe with a different moment in this episode?
Shake your heads.
They're afraid we'll call on them.
No. Yeah? Wait, let me... It's because it's going live, so people can't hear you without
sure.
my case.
I think there was a really relatable part where they talked about the case of the poor me's and how that can be something that I think a lot of times in relationships you go on the defense when you're having a difficult conversation. And that feeling of, wait, but you're not listening to me. You're not listening to me in the case of the poor me's. I know that's something I've seen in my partners. It's something I've seen in myself. And that was very relatable, of catching yourself when you're doing that and understanding when you need to listen to the other person and kind of seeing that mirror that you're talking about of, why do I feel defensive about this? Is this something that I've done myself that I'm self-conscious of? Is this something that, you know, you're oftentimes find yourself disliking something in someone else that you don't like in yourself? So I think that was a very relatable moment for me.
What about the fact that you have two people here who both have learned in completely different contexts that when they are in pain, they should not ask for help? In the end, this is probably the most translatable piece of this couple to the general. She, for her own reasons, learns to sleep alone rather than lean on him, and he, for his own reasons, stays up there in the living room, you know, fuming but not saying anything about his loneliness.
One of the obviously key parts of what brings them here is his affair, and you've done a lot of thinking and writing about affairs. Is it, it starts off feeling like that's the thing, and then it quickly seems like that's not actually the thing, that's just along the way, and the sleeping separately started years before. How do you approach when an affair comes up in these conversations, and what do you think it means to the conversation?
What it means is what they're going to tell me it means. I mean, I think that, in this case, the couple comes in 9 months later. So I also know that they may not be in the peak of the crisis mode. They may be in the what I call phase 2, which is the meaning making, the insight phase. Phase 3 is the vision phase for where they're going to go. So I'm not in with, you know, they're upset, but they're not in the, you know, in the 24-hour after kind of thing, when your whole world has just completely crumbled and all of that, for both of them. And then sometimes it is the centerpiece, and this is really what it is about. And you ask, why did this happen? How did this happen? Why now? What does it mean for you? What is the question that I do ask her is, what is the unique pain point for you? Because affairs hurt differently. The fact that they hurt is one thing, but what is it that twists the knife for you? And she says it, you know, it's the fact that my safety was not taken into consideration. I mean, it's like that he, in his own selfish thing, could just completely forget about me like that. That's a unique pain point. For other people, when that's not the issue, the unique pain point can be because when I picked her or him, I thought that person would never do this to me. I didn't stay with my ex, who I had a much better time with, because I thought my ex was going to not be a faithful person. And I left all of that for this, because I thought, you're not that kind of a person. How could you betray, not just me, but the plan that I had about you? It's the secret bargain that people make when they choose a partner, you understand? So there's a lot, you want to know the unique pain point, and then you need to know, you know, in this case, for example, she says, you know, we have zero connection anymore. We have no physical contact at this moment. And yet when she gets very upset, you know, I test. So this is a kind of, do I do guesses? I say, do you want him to, now, if he was to hold you as you are crying, would you want that? That's as safe a question as you can ask, right? So then she says, yes, I would. So then I say to him, if you want, you can. And then I watch what happens when he actually puts his hand around her. And she's not doing this. She's actually doing this. So now you can't see, right? I track the moment by moment physical response, the embodied experience of their reconnecting. And then he says, but I don't want to be rejected. And I think at this moment, you may have to take that risk. I mean, you can't have it. But then I understand that rejection is actually a theme in his life. And now we start to go backwards. Now tell me about this rejection thing. And then that's when I get the couch story. And then I get the I was bullied story. And then I get the my father hit me story. This is how we went backwards. It's not like I just asked, tell me your childhood. There is a word. And that word, I realize, is not just a one-time occurrence. And now we're going to look at the trail of that word, of that experience.
It's interesting, I mean, you calling out the touch and the way that they are physically with each other. I mean, that is something that we as listeners lack. Is that ever painful to either of you to feel like that's something that you can't convey in this form?
Well, it happens in the room. She does touching exercises and things that I just edit around, or we just edit around, because also kissing in a microphone is gross. It's, yeah. So we spare you that. You're welcome. But it definitely happens. I mean, she does all these exercises where she'll have them get up. There was an episode last season where she had them blindfolded and they caress each other and stroke each other and do other things that I can only imagine in the room next door. But yeah, it's not a pleasant listening experience, so we edit around it.
So you're in the room next door, watching or not watching?
Listening.
Listening. Wow.
Yeah, there's a bunch of nerdy audio producers in their office room down the hall with their headphones on, taking notes for 3 hours as this unfolds. And we don't bother her because you don't want to screw up what she's got going on. So, and sometimes I wonder, like, if her mic suddenly goes out, would I actually go in and stop her, because you don't want to interrupt something, because they've also forgotten that the mics are sitting on the table by this point. If you guys listened to the blindfold episode from last season, which was called Speak to Me in French, when that session started and she announced that she was blindfolding this couple and then she was going to do it in French, I was like, there is no fucking way I'm going to let this happen. She's going to like ruin this thing, and I can't translate it, and then I don't even know they're blindfolded. Like, I mean, I was having an anxiety attack. and decided I could trust her and I would give her 15 minutes and we would see where it went. And this was the only time I really thought I needed to knock on the door and tell her this is not going to fly. And that was a magical episode. If you haven't heard it, please go back to first season, Speak to Me in French, because it is truly phenomenal and should never have worked on radio, but did.
Yes, up front. We've got a mic coming toward you.
Hi, Esther. Two things. First of all, do you ever have people who are they're willing to do it, but they're nervous about their friends and family or people in their circles, like finding out who they are and whatever? And also, how do you track the effectiveness? Do you check in with them a year later?
Great question. So I follow, half of it I can answer and half of it Jessie will answer. So I ask people in general, when people come to see me, I ask them to write to me in advance. So they tell me a story, you know, and I also ask what it is that they would like from the session, and I also ask what they prepare to do in order to get what they want to achieve in the session, so that I'm not the only one who's going to work. After the session, I ask everybody to write to me. And sometimes I ask them to write to me right after and just tell me where this landed, what they took with them. And sometimes I ask them in the next 2 weeks to write to me. So almost everybody we saw wrote to us and gave us feedback on the session. Sometimes I referred them to other clinicians because they needed more help. This is not, it's a consultation, it's a therapeutic conversation. I don't consider this, therapy, but I know that I can offer them something, so I suggest how to continue. And then Jessie, most of the time, I think, or all the time, called every couple before they were going on the air. And we do know what some of the couples experienced from having people listen to them. So I think you should, the addict couple,
No, they were like delighted. And actually, it's alarming. If you've done interviews before, oftentimes when someone hears your edit of them on All Things Considered or whatever you're making this for, they're like, you dumbed me down to 15 seconds. And that you never get someone who says that was moving and beautiful. It's like, it's weird to have such positive affirmation to something. And to your question around what we do to kind of make you feel, anonymous isn't the right word.
Protected as best possible. And dignified, I think is really...
There are triggers when you're talking to someone. If I feel like I'm talking you into doing something that you maybe don't want to do, you're not a good candidate for this, because I'm not in the business of making you do something that you'll show up at the office and be like, no, I didn't sign up for this. And that becomes very clear during the screening call, whether or not it feels like you're convincing someone, because I don't want to talk you into doing this. And I always say to people, your mother could hear this, your next door neighbor, your best friend, and they're going to know it's you because they know you. They know what your voice sounds like, and they just know your problems. We also have to leave enough in so that you, the listener, kind of understand where they're coming from, what they do for a living if it's relevant. You don't need to know the specifics, but sometimes it's important. But we also have a team that listens to every episode before it goes out to make sure they write down all the identifiable things that we've left in and do searches to see if there is any way to find these people, because we want to be true to our word. But most of the time, your mother is going, if your mother listens to Where Should We Begin, she's going to know you're on it. And I can't help that because we're not altering the voices.
But I think the example of the addict couple, so there's a couple in season 1 with massive 40 years of pretty much of infidelities in a 40-year marriage, basically. And part of her experience was that she's been really shamed for still staying with him. But the people who listened to her gave her completely different feedback. So this becomes a communal experience in which people in the community actually may have more positive reactions to you than your own immediate entourage.
Yeah, she was so worried. That episode, Ira picked up a little bit of it for This American Life. And when I called them to say, This American Life is going to run part of your story, I didn't know how they would respond. And the wife was really nervous about how she would be portrayed, especially in the comment section, how people would talk about her. And if you read the comments from the TAL story, it's totally night and day different from what she thought she would expect. So she did feel supported in a really
felt
wonderful
supported
way.
in a way that her actual
that
friends
she
hadn't been
she wasn't
supporting
getting
her?
from
That's
her
interesting.
even her own children. So, not every story is going to end that way, and I realize that, but most of them have this kind of wonderful ending, or they feel like it was 3 hours and they left with a very different story than they came in with when they go to see Esther. Whether or not it translates, 6 months down the road, it's work, so they have to work on it.
Have you thought about doing Where Are They Now mini episodes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that a hand right there? Yes.
That concept's very interesting to me because with the Modern Love podcast, they've gone back like years and years later to some of these stories and like they're not together anymore, and you think you learned a lesson from this story and it's not true necessarily. And also I think it's interesting that a lot of people are saying like they didn't connect to this story, because I did. I had a similar experience that didn't affect my health, but that was the first place that my mind went, because I'd had to watch someone come in and talk about how their sister died because a partner cheated on them and gave them a horrible disease, like every year in high school. So it's interesting because the idea of letting yourself trust someone again and like believe in monogamy and believe all these relationships around you in your whole life, like they exist and that no one is cheating and no one has like natural inclinations for these things. Like, do you come back to these stories years and years later?
In my other work, when I wrote The State of Affairs, I went back to couples that I had seen 2, 5, and 10 years ago and asked them, what has happened to you? How did the therapy help or not? Where did you land? And people wrote to me long stories, actually, so that for the first time, most therapists have very little knowledge of what happens after the people leave them, unless a person writes to you and wants to share with you their future. And we don't have much customer service either, to find out if they thought it was good or not, The only thing I know is that if I ask a person if they've seen other colleagues and they can't remember the name, I never think it's a good sign. Because we remember our teachers, the ones that really kind of left a mark on us. So I did, for the first time, do a rather extensive search of people that I had seen over the years and what had happened and how their life kind of unfolded. I also, many times, if you stay in your profession long enough, a marriage ends. I just had a gay couple I saw last week. I saw one partner with his partner for a couple of years. They were together about 8-10 years, and now he came in with a new partner. 2 years later, they had separated, and he came, So I actually have many times seen people in more than one relationship over the years. It's like a family doctor.
We have someone in the front row here.
In addition to, like, when you explore monogamy, do you also now is like fluidity and sexual fluidity, and it's all like progressing so fast. Do you see yourself looking at how, like, people with open relationships and like 3 like polyamorous relationships interact and behave, and how that will end up moving forward or back, or who knows?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, in the first season, we have trans couples, we have polyamorous couples, we have a whole range. They're in the first season, right? So I don't take it for granted. I don't take for granted that a relationship is only made out of 2 people. I ask, is your relationship a relationship of 2 or 3 or more? What's the part? I ask how people have defined monogamy for themselves. Because I don't only think of monogamy in terms of sexual exclusivity, monogamy is sometimes defined actually as an emotional contract, and primacy and the exclusivity is not the central piece. So I use these terms and I ask every couple, does this word enter into your vocabulary? Do you have conversations about it? And how is it defined between the two of you? Because the word marriage, intimacy, sex, monogamy, infidelity, they all have still the same words, and their meanings have completely morphed. There is no connection between the meaning of these words 50 years ago and today. So I use the vocabulary, but I don't presume that I know what it means for the people that I'm working with.
I wanted to revisit for a moment the idea of the secret bargain, that I might choose one partner over another in part because I think they're not the type of person who would ever cheat on me. What is the takeaway for someone who has not chosen a partner yet? Do you not trust your instincts on whether or not you're the type of person who would commit infidelity because everybody is the type of person?
No, I don't. But I think your premise is interesting. I don't believe there is just a type of person. I think there are life circumstances. I don't think that this man ever thought that he would do that. The majority, if you talk about the subject of infidelity itself, the majority of people I see in my office are not repeat offenders. They are usually people who have often been faithful for years, decades sometimes, and then one day cross a line that they themselves never thought they would cross, at the risk of losing everything that they have built, and by experiencing themselves in a conflict between their own values and their behavior, actually. And so then the question is, why? Why are they willing to risk all of that for what? I don't think in types. I think in stories. I think that sometimes your life goes in a very different direction than you imagined, and then something happens. And when you look at it like that, there are a few people that have more of a propensity and more of a background that would lead them to that. But that is not the dominant category. Now, in terms of the bargain, no, trust your intuition, but know that you could be wrong. I mean, not wrong as in you went, but that doesn't guarantee you anything. No, I don't think there is a single couple that can walk around with a certificate of immunization against infidelity. I just don't. I think the best certificate you can have is the most robust, thriving relationship that hopefully says, this could happen, but I choose not to. That is the best prevention you have. For the rest, this happens. It has happened since marriage was invented. It has happened in every form of marriage or committed relationship that has existed. And as I have sometimes have said, it's the only commandment that's repeated twice in the Bible. Once for doing it and once just for thinking about it. So somebody understood human nature very well. You understand? That said, it is extremely painful and it is a complex subject and it can't be reduced to black and white and to victim and perpetrator, and it really needs, because the entire human drama is in this subject. And usually you have to go to the opera for that. You know, but what I do know with the bargain is that it says that in our choice of a person, we sometimes have a story that we have with ourselves. The same thing with monogamy. Everybody negotiates monogamy, but rarely with their partner. Most straight couples don't negotiate monogamy. It's 5 words. I catch you, you're dead. That's the end of the story. That's it for the conversation on monogamy. Straight couples, gay couples, polyamorous couples, open relationships, a totally different story. But the supposedly monogamous couple doesn't talk about it because what's to talk about since it's a given? Until the shit hits the fan. And then suddenly the crisis propels the conversations that have never taken place, sometimes with a level of honesty that has never existed before. So the lies create a new honesty that is actually very, very strengthening to some couples. Some affairs will destroy a relationship. That's it. Kill it. And some of them will actually remake it, you know. But the bargain is that, you know, I thought you would be the one to take care of the kids. I thought you would be there for my dying mother. I thought you would never get angry with me. I thought you would never abandon me. It's not just about the cheating. I thought it's like I sized you up, and I created the person that I needed you to be. That may not, but you know, as I sometimes have said, the other person suddenly found themselves recruited for a play they didn't audition for, and that's the break. You understand what I'm saying?
I love that you love stories, and I think the easy thing to do when dealing with infidelity is to have a knee-jerk reaction of, that doesn't align with my story, and thus you are this character that's totally opposite of the story I was telling myself. And there's a lot more gray area in relationships than I think people like to accept if it goes against their narrative. I think the impressive thing that you do in your sessions is you sit in that gray area with people, and it can get uncomfortable. I feel like, oh my gosh, how is she orchestrating this? And like, they're holding hands and they're doing this. It's such an intimate moment. How did you learn to be so comfortable in that vulnerability, and who taught you that?
Who taught me that? That's a very good question. I think it's probably a combination of things, but I had an extraordinary mentor named Salvador Minuchin, who died at 95 this year, who was kind of one of the fathers of the field of family therapy. And you know, sitting with a family is very different than sitting with an individual. I think the first thing I learned was the transition from individual therapy to family therapy. A family that's in a mess, that is a level of intensity that you have never experienced. I mean, it's like you don't know where to begin. And you're thrown in there in your early 20s, and you don't know, you know, the force of it is families can be, you know, I mean, I don't have to tell you. It's just an unbelievable intensity.
For you.
And I learned to sit in this and to not get so scared. I also learned to stop it. I'm an orchestra conductor. You know, if something unravels in front of me, I do not let people do this in front of me. They don't have to do in front of me what they do at home that they feel so ashamed about to begin with. Somebody has to stop this. So I have a theater background, so that lives inside of me too. I've done a lot of puppetry in my early years, and I have a whole bag of puppets in my office, and I work a lot with objects and with music and with touch, and I don't just talk. I don't just sit there and talk, and I certainly don't just let people talk for hours without, you know, creating a cadence of this. You know, there's a line, I finished the keynote at South by Southwest with the line that actually came out like that, but now I love the line. I said, relationships are your story. Write often, but edit well. And I think I edit as this thing is in front of me. I also think that therapy needs to be an experience. It has to be experiential. You cannot come in there one way and leave exactly the same way, or it was useless. Something must happen to you, and it has to happen experientially. And that means mind, body, soul, heart, all of it. So I think of it as, how do I create an experience? When I do the touch, it's not because I just think it's sweet to touch. It's because in that moment, something needs to happen. And sometimes between two people, there is a wall, that invisible wall, that hand that wants to do this but can't anymore because there is so much garbage attached to it. And I want to see if that hand could once again be pure. And if the only way you know is by staging it, by seeing it in front of you. And sometimes it's absolutely useless and it does nothing. And then you just say, okay, different direction.
Jesse, that must make your job kind of easy, because it sounds like it's all produced.
I was just fantasizing about the puppets and how could we get those
yeah,
this season.
I know. I'm intrigued by that. Yes,
we
right
can
here.
take a few at once and see if there are themes as well.
Oh, that's a good idea.
It's probably better.
Okay.
Hi, I'm really fascinated by what you said about how you'll sometimes see people with a different partner a certain amount of time later. And I was just wondering how much leeway you give someone when you have seen them like with their patterns of behavior, but how much kind of how much of a blank slate is it, and how much do you allow them knowing that they're with a new person if their behavior may or may not be different, or how kind of what's your mindset going in when you see them in a new situation?
Great question. Yeah.
We're gonna take a few and look for themes. So.
Another one about your, I don't know if this is on, another one about your actual therapy practice.
How many therapists are in this room? Oh, super. How many patients are in this room? clients, people who have consumed therapy. Sorry.
I'm curious how you negotiate like natural rapport that you might have with one part of the couple or another part of the couple over an extended time. Like if you have an automatic friendship with one part or another part of the couple feels like you have ganged up against them, or you over-identify with another part of the couple. How do you negotiate, kind of negotiate the natural rapport that you have?
The neutrality.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's some hands over here.
Hi, I just wanted to say a couple of things. One is about the, in the podcast that you asked us to listen to, I don't remember your name with the red hair. Jessie. You were saying about the things that happen that are not audible, like the hug. I just want to say that I felt like it was palpable from listening, that the energy that was happening between them. And that, like what I find interesting that we've been talking about, that couple, and then you mentioned the couple that had been married for 40 years from the previous season. And I guess what I'm wondering about is in both of those couples, especially, I would say, I had the sense of love, that there was this love, and in some couples that love can, if they have the ability to reflect and whatever it takes, can get past the infidelity or whatever it is and move on. And I guess I'm sort of wondering or fascinated by this, like, what is that thing? And it seems like that's kind of what we're dancing around here a little bit.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Some of you have questions about therapy, and some of you have questions about infidelity, and some of you have questions about the podcast. All right, but to the question about the neutrality and about the people in the other relationship, I tend to not think too much about people in essential ways. He is this way, she is that way. That goes back to the question here too. I really look at people in context, and I look at problems in context. That is a systemic way of thinking, you know. How is this relationship organized around this issue? And what is the function of this issue in this couple? I also, back to your question, the victim of the affair is not always the victim of the marriage. You know, there's a larger story than just this thing with which they come in. And when a person comes like in this couple, the gay couple I mentioned, you know, they come back, and why did he come back? Because somehow he thought he trusted me and I knew him well. And my main rapport actually was with the partner saying, what's it like for you to come into this office, given that his ex was here for quite a while, and you're sitting in the same spot, actually. You know, what do you know about me? How has he introduced that idea? I think it's really brave of you that you're willing to enter such a known and intimate place of his. If at any moment you feel like I'm not joining with you well, please let me know. And then I spend another 10 minutes just talking to him to create a rapport. You know, I'm pretty much work the way you see me. What you see is what it is. It's not like everything I learned about not being a blank slate in my early training is gone. I relate to, you know. I understand that it's a different experience for this person to come in, and I think, and then I'm looking, you know, are there things here that, this is so interesting. You picked somebody so different, but you find yourself feeling some of the same things that you used to talk about before. So the constant factor here is you. You know, tell me more. You know, what does it tell you that once again that same thing that you would, and it's that I'm exploring that together, and I understand why me. You know, and then I ask also, why me again on this thing? You know, what is it that you think I know or can do for you or with you, etc. I have all kinds of allegiances. I don't think therapy is ever neutral. Every therapist comes in with a value system. They may be aware of it or not. they may be hiding it or not. But we have to be I do think we need to own it and be very clear that it's not about our lives and our choices. But I don't think it's a neutral experience. We live in a cultural system, in a political system, in an economic class, and there are intersections between all of that, and all of this sits here with me as I talk to you. And you may think that I'm just some white woman with a French accent, and that is just a tiny bit of who I am, and you may not know either. And so gradually, we deal with our projections, and we deal with what we assume about the other, and if you assume that because I have a French accent, affairs are just a regular thing for me, you know, that's another one I have. Because it's very good to have a French accent to work on sexuality. It's not very good to have a French accent to work on infidelity. For Americans, you know, I'm neither French for that matter. But, you know, so all of this. And the best thing I do is I put it out. I just put it in the open, you know. Is there anything you need to know? Is there anything you feel? If at any point you think I'm not getting it or that I'm missing something, please tell me. I am never right. I'm just thinking out loud with you, and I'll try to be as helpful as I can. But I'm not right, and I don't have to live with the consequences of your decisions. Only you do. And then on occasion, my sympathies go here, and on occasion, but I say it as well. And on occasion, if I just listen another 10 minutes, I'm going to be 1 minute here, and 1 minute here, and 1 minute here. It's like it fluctuates because a relationship is a dance in which one person makes another person do something that makes another one, you know, it's the more. Every time you watch an escalation, it's what I do that makes you do, that makes me do, that makes you do. And it's that thing that you try to actually open up. And then
you've said a couple times that you don't think about people as types. I'm curious how that meshes with kind of making a podcast out of this, because do you find that you're looking for certain types or saying, oh no, we already did the cheating guy this season, let's not do that again?
It's a great question.
So first season was very eye-opening because I felt like everyone that applied, sex was their primary issue. And so we would like scratch our heads thinking like, God, everyone has problems, you know, sexually. Like, I don't know. But then they'd come and sit in her office and you'd find that actually, and I learned this from Esther, sex is a symptom of probably a much bigger issue. So what they tell you that they haven't had sex in 2 years, they don't find their partner attractive, whatever. But then when they sit in front of her, it's like, whoa, that is totally not what we saw coming. So there's some element of you don't know what you're going to get when they actually sit down in front of her. And then there's some element of like, yes, we've sort of done he cheated, then we did she cheated, then we did the sex addict. And that was enough infidelity for first season. We're tiptoeing around some different topics in the second season. We kind of had this thread of secrecy in all of the episodes where there is something that comes out within the course of the session that sort of makes you think differently about the couple and makes them feel differently, whether it's something they've never said to each other or a conversation that they have with this object that Esther pulls from her shelf and puts it on a chair and makes the woman break up with her husband who's not in the room, but her girlfriend is in the room, but she wants to have this exit conversation. This is sort of where the puppet could come in, but it was this like, I'm like, what is she even talking to?
You have to explain, the people are not New Yorkers. They come from all over the US, of all class, all race, all color, all background. It's very refreshing. It's you're not just, you're not in they're not urban. They sometimes are for the first time in New York. Which, as a foreigner, that's the first place we try to come.
Yeah, so demographics play into that, where they live in the country, how much money they make, what their issue is, how long they've been married. All of those are factors in why we would bring someone in. But the underlying thing, I think, about all of them, and I think Olivia would agree with me, who also helps book these.
Olivia is here.
Olivia
right?
is the other redhead in the room over there. Is that you want to help this couple, and that's how you ultimately choose them, is that you hear something in their story and you think if they spend 3 hours with Esther, they will walk out differently. And so that's the thing that I think everyone shares in this, is that Olivia and I believe in them and want them We want them to work it out.
They've already heard the story of the daughter, right?
Yeah, it was first. Well, it's out. It's the
Right.
first episode this season. You need help to help her.
Yes, you know. So this is the first episode of season 2, which a family with a daughter that hasn't left her room in 2 years, and she's been diagnosed with everything: PTSD, depression, bipolar, you name it. You must think like she's been diagnosed with everything in case she actually does succeed in hurting herself, and somebody will be protected. And I don't think in types, because I think that relationships make us, and we make relationships. I don't think it. Of course, we come with characteristics and stuff, but back to that question, we become different people in different relationships, and I don't necessarily think that pathologizing is that useful. That doesn't mean that I don't have categories in my head, but I tend to be much more looking at the sequence of what goes on in front of me than some label that actually makes it more convenient for me than for the people.
Well, I'm sure that we could go all night. Maybe we can do one more round of a batch and instant theme making. There's one in the back. Right behind you, yeah.
Thank you so much, Esther. My question is about you. You are a healer. You help so many people, and I wonder how you protect yourself and prevent yourself from internalizing some of these really painful emotions that come up during your sessions.
You should tell them what Jack does.
Let's see, right there in the middle. Yeah.
Hi, Esther. It seemed like the first couple that their issues had to do with communicating with each other and also with themselves. And all these relationships seem very different, but communication seems to be a big part of it. Are there any best practices that you have for relationships other than just asking for help when you need it?
And then did you still have a question over there? Yeah.
You sort of answered it, but one thing that's great about the podcast, amongst everything about the podcast, is how sort of hopeful it is. Like when you read the synopsis, you're like, oh, they should just break up. That's a disaster. And then somehow, like, during the course of it, you're like, I think they're going to make it work, And I feel like you sort of answered this, but I was curious if that was...
Why do you listen to it?
Oh,
that's my curiosity to all of you.
I love
I would
everything
love
about
to
this
ask you
podcast.
that.
I think it's you're amazing. I think the fact that you you can toggle between and be like, I'm on her side, I'm on his side, or whoever's side is, and ultimately feel like you're really not on anyone's side by the end. Like as a listener, that you're just absorbing and taking it in for yourself. I've probably learned something about my own relationships in every single episode somehow, and you're charming and interesting and awesome.
No, that I just want to know about the podcast.
Well,
it's very important because I didn't make it alone. It's so important. I mean, there's Jessie and there's Olivia and there's...
and they're all actually, except for Paul, Eva's over there. The big boss, Eric, is over there. The woman who makes all our marketing and tells the world about us, Vanessa, is over there.
It is very important. I could not have done this without this extraordinary team. It's very...
You see that too, like like when I describe the podcast to people, I'm like, oh, you got to listen to this. Like they're always like, that is a genius idea. It's a genius setup of like, it's a one-time, it's not like listening to your regular it's not like listening to your regular couples where it's 6 months in. It's like a one-time thing, which is this like window into their world. And I also am kind of curious about like the selection process. Like I feel like part of the reason why it's so hopeful is I assume that you've chosen not to include the people where you're like, oh, she should just run.
There's only one couple that we interviewed that didn't make it in the show.
Really?
Every couple otherwise is...
Well, no, she means that we recorded. There's one couple who came in and we recorded. There are lots of people who we interview we're like, nope.
No, okay. And so like I assume part of the selection process is because of that. And the one that you interviewed and the one that you actually consulted with, and didn't make it on, was it because you felt like they weren't salvageable?
Jesse, that's for you.
I think Esther thinks this could have been an episode, and we took this as a challenge, and I think we will find it, but in my jaded producer mind, and I think the team would back me up on this, they were really young. They were on the cusp of deciding whether or not they could get married. They were mid-20s maybe or something like that. And their problems, I'm being mean, but their problems were sort of like where to go for Christmas. And it was, they just didn't have the depth of knowledge and years of bickering.
I disagreed.
Yeah.
Sometimes as a...
but she makes the decision.
Well, we'll listen to season 3 and see if they make an appearance.
I want a young couple to come in, and we definitely want to ponder, like, is this the relationship that you should get married? You know, I want to deal with that, but it was just this particular couple, they just weren't very interesting.
I will say it's sort of, there
Sorry.
is something...
Give it to the woman behind you,
Oh,
so then we can
Kind
do
of in the same
closing
vein,
story.
but I was wondering if you ever deal with people, and you said you come to these sessions with your own values and your own like schemas of how you view things. So are you ever inside just like this couple should not be together, like, and
yes,
especially
there is actually a woman in season 1, right? Or in season 2, the one that leaves. Two. Yeah. There is a.
Thank you, Olivia.
Thank you.
I wasn't sure which woman you were going with, but
well,
yes.
you know, he's basically abusive to the children, and she basically tells him, if you do this again, I will have to go. And I say, you must, and she does, and we tell it. So you'll find that out as you listen. Yes, I mean there are situations where it's quite. It was quite clear. You know, that's not the only situation, but just to very quickly, what I do. So actually, my life partner, my husband, and one of my sons are here. So that is what. Who is it? But it is one of the best ways that I take care of myself. You know, I have a very rich social life. I mean, I'm surrounded by a lot of people that with whom I live my life, and I think that's probably. I really do think that the quality of your relationships determines the quality of your life. I think of it for myself, and I think of it for the people I see, and I do a lot. I do fun things. But I laugh with the people too. I think if you notice, in every episode there is humor. So in the midst of hell, there sometimes is humor as well. And that gives me hope like it gives them hope. Together or not together. I don't think the answer for every couple is to stay together. I don't think longevity is the only marker of success. And I don't think any relationship that ends is by definition a failure. That is all stuff that has got to be revisited, you know. So that's how I take care of myself. And I've learned to not absorb, but sometimes I do. That session of the daughter stayed with me. I was so glad I got to see these people and to get a letter from them that they had finally had a conversation of 2 hours with this daughter for the first time in 2 years. That makes you feel like, yeah, you know.
And the daughter said, "You get me."
Yeah, the daughter wrote to me actually. You know, from behind. You know, they told the daughter what I had said, and the daughter said, you know, she gets it. She's got it. So that kind of thing, it gives you mileage for a while, you know. And then for the communication, there's so much I can say, but the main thing I would say on the podcast related, they have plenty of online courses you can learn with me about building a thriving relationships, which I invite you to go see. But I believe that part of the podcast is that if you listen to these conversations, you may find a vocabulary for the conversations that you may need to have. So this is a part of that. Communication is the essence of relationships today because all the old rules have gone. There is nothing telling you how you must do it. So the only way you have is negotiation. And that's what has made them so much more difficult. Because used to be very clear who gets the breadwinner and who wakes up at night to feed the baby and who gets to demand for sex. Everything was clear. Now it's all up for negotiation. And so we really need to learn tools that we didn't need to have before. That's the short version on the. To not give you a whole course on communication.
Well, thank you, Esther, and thank you, Jesse. You can get more of Esther at estherperel.com. You can get more of this podcast coming out publicly on iTunes.
And on Audible.
And on Audible. Yes, you can get the whole thing on Audible right now. And we wanted to end by hearing from you guys. So hopefully you saw the confession booth out there. And the prompt, which I failed to write down, so I'm worried I'm going to get it wrong. Do you remember it exactly?
It was, what do you wish you could tell your partner, but you've never had the words or the appropriate time to do so?
So we're going to close by listening to some of your thoughts on that. Thank
when
you
he
all.
shaves, he misses this spot right underneath his nose, and there are like 5 or 6 really long whiskers every time, and it just looks awful, and it hurts when I kiss him, and I hate it. I don't know why. I'm too scared to tell him. I should. I'll do it tonight.
When will you begin to take care of yourself?
I moved to New York for you, and you haven't seen me in over a year.
Just want to watch TV and hang out alone.
Just because you've only worn your socks walking around the house doesn't mean they're not dirty. Wash your socks more.
I wish I could tell my partner that I am impressed by him every day.
I think you're more courageous than I am.
I wish I had told my best friend that she maybe shouldn't marry her now husband.
I wish I could tell my partner to please buckle her seatbelt when she's in a cab. I know she does it when I'm not around, and it terrifies me.
That you betrayed me. Partner who's not here, I wish you told me I was pretty more, because I know you already like everything else about me.
All right. Well, it sounds like some of you have assignments for tonight. Thank you all for coming and for listening.